The key feature of the OM-1 that makes it such a great camera for Steve Ingram's easy bird and wildlife photography is, of course, the subject detection, auto-tracking, autofocus. The OM-1 will auto-detect birds, dogs and cats, even cars, trains, and planes. And whichever you have it set to, it works amazingly well. When set to birds, it will detect and highlight, put a white box around, any bird in the frame. It also works well for butterflies, dragon and damselflies, other insects, reptiles and amphibians, and small mammals in my experience. In dog and cat mode, it will detect most larger wildlife, but not birds. More than that, if possible, it will also find and highlight the eye of the bird or beastie, and it will track the bird or beastie and its eye as it moves in the frame or as you move the camera to reframe. In an ideal world, it would also focus on the eye of the subject, but it's not quite that simple. As it turns out, it will only focus on the eye if the white subject detection frame intersects or at least touches the gray outline of the selected focus target area. There are various focus target areas from the whole sensor to a single spot, and you can move the smaller focus targets, anything less than full, around on the sensor. I suppose they might have done this to allow the photographer to choose between multiple birds or beasties in the same frame, but in reality, it just seems overly complicated. I mean, if you have focus set for bird detection, then the camera should assume, you would think, that you want to focus on the bird. As it is, the camera may have detected and outlined a bird, even highlighted the eye, but it may or may not focus on the bird, depending on where the focus target area is at the time. This might be something OM systems might like to refine in future firmware updates. It's certainly something I would like them to refine. It is simple enough to set the subject detection to your chosen subject on Camera Menu Page 2 Autofocus. Use birds for anything but larger wildlife. Do not try to shoot birds while in animal detection. It does not work. Set what you need here. This will be one of the major differences between your bird and wildlife modifications. Simple. Dealing with the autofocus target area is another thing altogether. There are a couple of different ways to access the focus target area settings. One is to press the center button on the 5-way control wheel in program mode, or the button between the menu button and the viewfinder in the upper left back of the camera. This brings up the super control panel. Pressing the center button one more time activates the scrolling buttons so you can select features to modify. Scroll to the first item on the second line. This is the focus target area setting, and it shows you your current setting. You can use the back or front thumb wheel to cycle through the options until you see the one you want. Then, too, you can reprogram the push-down function on the multi-selector button on page 1 of the settings menus under multi-selector settings to bring up the current focus target area setting and allow you to use the thumb wheels to change it. The multi-selector is a little joystick-like button to the right of the viewfinder on the back of the camera. It rocks to move the focus target area around on the screen, but it comes with the push-down function disabled. Even without programming, rocking the multi-selector will open the current focus target area screen so that you can move the target area. Using the thumb wheels, while the screen is open, will cycle through the focus target area choices. However, by rocking the control, you've now moved the focus area if anything other than all was selected. Make sure it's where you want it before going back to taking photos. You can recenter it by pressing down on the multi-selector one more time. Finally, under button settings, there's a way to reprogram the arrow buttons on the 5-way control wheel to open the focus target area settings and to move the focus area around. If you own a previous OMD camera that does not have the little multi-selector, the joystick button, you'll be used to using the arrows on the 5-way control to do this anyway. I prefer different focus target areas for different subjects. In fact, besides the obvious subject detection settings, the focus target area settings are the other main difference between my bird custom mode, my birds in flight, and wildlife custom modes. For stationary birds, where there's not a lot of obscuring foliage between me and the bird, I mostly use either middle or cross or small focus target area. Clearly, the larger the focus target area, the easier it is to make it overlap with any bird detection frames. And the smaller the focus target area, the more precisely you can choose your focus point, but at the cost of having to have the focus target area right over your subject all the time. You might be tempted to set the focus target area to all and let bird detection do all the work. I'm currently experimenting with that setting, but in my experience so far, when the lens is so far out of focus that the camera cannot find a bird, or when there is no bird in the frame, autofocus can struggle to settle on anything. You can overcome this by manually focusing until a bird comes somewhat into focus, or whatever else you might want to focus on is mostly in focus. Bird detection will take it from there if there's a bird, or the autofocus will find something to focus on if there is not. So far, autofocus seems to work best if you start with one of the more restricted focus target areas, but I could certainly get used to doing it either way. For birds where there is a lot of obstructing foliage, sticks, twigs, etc. between me and the bird, and often a confusing background as well, I use the single point. It's not as fast to pick up focus as the larger areas, and not as reliable on birds without a lot of contrast in the feathers. But if you can get that spot on any contrasty part of any bird already outlined by the subject detection, then the camera will focus in seemingly impossible situations, right through foreground foliage and twigs. When I save my bird modifications to custom mode, I save the cross-focus target area, and then change to large, middle, small, or single point as needed. On the other hand, I do use the all setting for birds in flight, where there is unlikely to be any other subject in the frame. For wildlife, I begin with the large focus target area and change to smaller areas if there is obstructing foreground. This is all very much still something I'm experimenting with, and I really wish OM systems would come up with a simpler solution. That said, focus with subject detection is already almost magical. Eye-tracking autofocus is a wonderful thing for the bird and wildlife photographer. As a friend said, it almost seems like cheating. On the autofocus menu pages, I also set autofocus to continuous and turn on AF plus MF. AF plus MF keeps the focus ring on the lens active, even in autofocus mode, and allows you to touch up focus as needed, or, more often, to pull or push focus quickly to about the right distance to give autofocus a better starting point. I set autofocus on half press to on for all situations, so that when I half press the shutter button, autofocus is engaged. There's also a back button on the OM-1 that will engage autofocus, if you prefer back button focus. On the next page, I like AF indicator set to mode 2, which turns on both the detection frame and the eye focus frame. These are just indicators, but they do give some reassurance that the system is working. Finally, on the next AF menu page, there's a setting for AF sensitivity. This setting adjusts how quickly autofocus changes focus once focus is established. A higher sensitivity might help with rapidly moving subjects like birds in flight or wildlife in conflict. A lower sensitivity might help with birds moving through foliage, where you want the focus to stay on the bird and not jump to every passing leaf, or, say, an elk moving through dense forest. In practice, however, you can and should leave sensitivity set to 0. It seems to work best there under most conditions. I do turn it up to +1 for my birds in flight mode. In the next video, we'll talk about drive modes.